Welcome to the deep dive. There's this really powerful, sometimes kind of unsettling fascination people have with celebrity scandals, right? Especially when they pull back the curtain on the darker side of fame. And in music, which, let's face it, often celebrates excess, when that wall crashes into serious legal trouble, well, that's when everyone really pays attention. So today we're embarking on a pretty intense deep dive. We're calling it music's major drug scandals. 2015-2025 review. And look, this isn't just about the flashy headlines you might have scrolled past. It's really about trying to understand the deep, lasting effects these incidents have had on the artists. Yeah, but also on the whole music industry, and, how we all think about these things.
Exactly. Our mission today, really, is to take a close look at a whole stack of these recent high-profile cases. We're talking internationally known musicians here, and we want to pull out the most important bits of insight for you. We'll dig into the specific drugs involved, what actually happened during the arrests and investigations, the legal fallout, which was often really severe, the industry reaction, and of course, how the public responded. Think of this as a shortcut, a way for you to get truly up to speed on a whole decade of really significant events. We'll cover some surprising facts, maybe some crucial context you missed.
Right, and the information we're using for this deep dive, it comes straight from a really comprehensive review. We looked at 10 of the biggest drug-related scandals involving these international stars over the last 10 years. We focused specifically on the ones that had a major impact, publicly or within the industry itself, and crucially, the ones that actually led to arrests or serious legal action.
And just so you know where this is coming from, all these details are rigorously sourced. We're relying on top-tier news outlets and official reports. Associated Press, Reuters, ABC News, The Guardian, places like that. This way, you can be sure you're getting a factual, balanced perspective on what are often, let's be honest, pretty complex situations.
Okay, let's get into it then. We're going to kick things off by looking at something really tragic, a theme that sadly connects several of these cases, especially from a few years back. I'm talking about the devastating impact of the opioid crisis, and specifically, how fentanyl emerged as this terrifying, hidden danger.
Yeah, that period sort of 2018, 2019, it felt like there was this alarming spike. Accidental overdoses, near-fatal incidents involving fentanyl, it really sent shockwaves way beyond just the music world. It suddenly felt much bigger than just personal choices. It was like a public health crisis playing out right there in the headlines, affecting everyone.
And we have to start with the loss of Mac Miller, American rapper, producer. His death in 2018, it just hit so hard. Why was that one so particularly impactful, do you think? What was at the core of it? Well, he was found dead from an accidental overdose, and he was just so young, only 26. But the key detail, the thing that made it so horrifying, and frankly, changed the conversation, was the discovery that he'd taken counterfeit oxycodone pills, and these pills were laced with fentanyl. The fentanyl, there it is. Yeah, alongside cocaine and alcohol, which were also in his system. But the fentanyl was the shocker. And this wasn't just a personal tragedy that ended there. It immediately kicked off a major federal investigation. They went after the supply chain, trying to figure out where these deadly pills came from. It signaled this was a much bigger systemic problem. Right? It felt like his death really crystallized the fear around fentanyl. It wasn't just some abstract crisis anymore. It was specific. It was deadly, and it could affect anyone.
Absolutely. Mac Miller's death became this grim turning point. It shifted the narrative from another artist struggling with addiction to the terrifying reality of a poisoned drug supply. Fentanyl became a household name, a real source of fear, and it spurred this unprecedented federal action against the dealers. It was maybe the starkest warning up to that point. Anyone could be a victim. Even someone successful and loved like Mac Miller. And that federal investigation you mentioned, it actually led to results. Because often tracking the sorts of illicit drugs feels almost impossible. How did they manage to achieve accountability in Miller's case? They were relentless. And yes, it led to real accountability. 3 men were eventually charged for distributing those specific counterfeit pills that killed him.
Wow.
Yeah, and the courts followed the through. One dealer pleaded guilty, got nearly 11 years in federal prison. Another one agreed to 17 years of really substantial sentence. And a third guy, he actually faced trial, looking at a potential life sentence. So real consequences for the suppliers. Definitely. And for the music industry, Miller's death wasn't just another sad news story. It became this undeniable symbol of the wider opioid crisis hitting artists hard. It forced some really important and frankly overdue conversations within the community about just how dangerous fentanyl-laced drugs were. And on a different note, his music continued to resonate. Swimming got a posthumous Grammy nomination, and they released Circles after his death. His art lived on.
The public reaction, the grief, but also the anger, it felt really intense around Mac Miller. How did people respond?
Oh, the music community was just devastated. He was incredibly well-liked. He had artists like Chance the Rapper, Travis Scott, so many others, performing at this big tribute concert for him. A real moment of solidarity.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was powerful. And fans, they mourned globally. Social media was just flooded. The news coverage was huge. And importantly, it wasn't just focused on the tragedy itself, but specifically on the danger of these counterfeit pills. And that really pushed broader discussions forward about addiction, yes, but also critically about the accountability of drug dealers, people who knowingly or even negligently supply substances that kill. Okay, so from that absolute tragedy, let's move to another case from 2018 that also involved fentanyl, but thankfully had a different outcome, Demi Lovato's overdose.
What were the specifics there?
Right, July 24th, 2018. Demi Lovato, huge American pop star, rushed to a hospital in LA, found unconscious at home. Paramedics used Narcan immediately. That's the opioid antidote, which straight away told him it was an opioid overdose. Initially, some reports mentioned possible heroin, but later, the focus really narrowed onto oxycodone, likely laced with fentanyl.
What here it is again, fentanyl.
Exactly. And Lovato herself later revealed just how bad it was. She suffered multiple severe complications, 3 strokes, a heart attack. It just shows the brutal impact of these drugs. Unbelievable, so close, incredibly close. Police did investigate the source of the drugs. There were allegations she got pills from a dealer, but, and this is key, no public arrests were ever made against that supplier. The whole incident was treated primarily as a medical emergency for Lovato, not really a criminal case against her personally. Right, so no criminal charges for her, which is significant, but...
Professionally, the consequences must have been huge.
Oh, absolutely. While she avoided the legal system, the professional fallout was immediate and significant. She had to cancel the entire rest of her 2018 world tour, straight into rehab and extended inpatient program to focus purely on recovery.
Took her a while to come back, didn't it?
It did. Over a year before she really returned to music. I think many remember that powerful comeback performance at the Grammys in 2020, where she directly addressed the overdose in her song. And like the Mac Miller situation, this event really hammered home the toll of the opioid epidemic, even on massive stars. It also made people on the business side, promoters, insurers, much more cautious. They started paying more attention to artist health, well-being on tour, maybe put more support systems in place.
The public reaction to Demi Lovato's overdose, it felt different somehow. Very visible, very empathetic. Why do you think that was?
It completely dominated the news cycle globally. She has such a massive, dedicated fan base, and people felt really connected to her. Fans held vigils. Some even gathered outside venues where she was meant to perform, singing her song sober. It was this incredible outpouring of support. Celebrities, millions of ordinary people sending messages. I think a big part of it was because Lovato had already been so open for years about her struggles with addiction, with mental health. She built that connection.
That makes sense.
So the media coverage was largely candid, but also quite compassionate, less judgment, more focus on relapse as part of recovery. And crucially, it sparked these wider conversations nationally about addiction, about mental health that helped reduce stigma. News outlets made a point of highlighting Narcan, calling it a Lazarus drug, which brought so much needed attention to opioid antidotes. The overall reaction was just overwhelmingly empathetic. People saw her ordeal less as a failure, more as this tragic wake-up call about how dangerous laced drugs really are.
Okay, another really high-profile and ultimately tragic case from around that time involved Juice WRLD, a rising star, gone way too soon, and his death had this incredibly dramatic element happening during a drug bust. That sounds almost unbelievable.
It was incredibly dramatic, almost surreal. December 2019, federal agents, Chicago police, they were waiting for Juice WRLD's private jet when it landed at Midway Airport. They got tip-off drugs and guns on board.
Wow, so they were ready for him.
They were, and the search, what they found was bagging. 41 vacuum-sealed bags of marijuana, about 70 pounds worth. 70 pounds plus 6 bottles of liquid codeine and 3 firearms, just a massive amount of contraband.
And then what happened?
The autopsy later confirmed it was an accidental overdose. Oxycodone and codeine, a lethal mix. The whole incident, it just highlighted the extreme risks, maybe self-medication under pressure, the fear of arrest, and just how quickly opioids can kill.
It's hard to process such immense talent, ending like that. You wonder about the pressures these young artists are under. So obviously, his own legal issues ended with his death. But were there other legal consequences from that raid?
There were. While Juice WRLD's personal case tragically closed, the fallout continued. 2 of his security guards on the plane, they were arrested right there for gun possession, didn't have the right permits for Illinois. But more significantly, that huge drug seizure, the 70 pounds of marijuana, the codeine, it became part of a larger ongoing DEA investigation into drug trafficking. It suggested a network beyond just him. Professionally, of course, his death meant canceled shows, future plans scrapped. But it also led to a flood of posthumous music releases, which his fans really clung to. And it absolutely sparked urgent debates across the music industry about drug use. Yeah, but also about the need for better mental health support, especially for young artists facing sudden fame. His family and label actually did something really positive afterwards. They founded the Live Free 999 Foundation. It's dedicated to helping young people struggling with addiction. Depression, a really meaningful response.
The media coverage was intense, and I remember people pointing out this eerie connection to his own lyrics, almost like he predicted it.
It was all over the news, very somber. And it really shone a harsh light on the prevalence of drug use in parts of the rap scene, particularly among emerging stars. Fans, fellow artists, everyone was just shocked. Juice WRLD had been on such an incredible trajectory. #1 album, just months before. Tributes poured in. His music streams surged. People wanted to connect with his art. And yeah, that connection to his lyrics, especially the song Legends, where he literally talks about young artists dying young. It was uncanny and deeply unsettling. The whole case really forced a conversation about the pressures of fame, about self-medication as a coping mechanism. Outlets like ABC News detailed the sheer amount of drugs found, really emphasizing the deadly risks of opioids.
Okay, so we've looked at the devastating rise of fentanyl in these tragic overdose cases. Now let's shift focus slightly. We're moving into cases where artists weren't just users, but were allegedly part of larger criminal operations. This often meant facing federal charges, archival indictments, really serious stuff.
Right, this next section really digs into what happens when the lines blur. Between the artistic persona, maybe one that glorifies crime, and alleged real-world criminal activity. We see the law reaching deep into their lives, forcing this kind of collision between image and reality.
And you can't talk about that without talking about Tekashi 6ix9ine. His case, it felt less like a legal proceeding and more like a reality TV show unfolding in real time. It was everywhere. What were the core charges that made it so explosive?
November 2018, federal agents arrest him. And the indictment wasn't just for one thing, it was a sweeping RICO charge.
Okay, Raiko, explain that quickly for anyone who might not know. It sounds serious. What were the core charges that made it so explosive?
No, it is serious. RICO stands for Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Basically, it lets prosecutors bundle together a pattern of alleged criminal acts like drug dealing, robbery, even violence, and charge individuals for being part of a larger criminal enterprise.
So it connects everything.
Exactly. It allows them to go after the whole organization, not just isolated crimes. And the penalties are usually much harsher. For Tekashi, the indictment covered drug trafficking, specifically alleging he and his gang, the 9 Trey Gangsta Bloods, conspired to distribute large amounts of heroin, fentanyl, MDMA, and marijuana. But it also included things like armed robbery, shootings. The FBI and ATF had apparently been investigating his involvement for a while, painting him not just as a member, but as someone actively financing and participating in the gang's violent activities.
Right. And facing what? Decades in prison. He made a decision that basically blew up the internet and the hip-hop world.
He did, facing a potential minimum of 47 years, possibly life. He chose to fully cooperate with the federal prosecutors. Meaning he pleaded guilty to multiple charges, and then, crucially, he testified against his former gang associates. In a very public trial in 2019, his testimony was key in convicting 2 high-ranking 9 Trey members.
And that cooperation got him a deal.
A huge deal. Because he cooperated so extensively, he received what many saw as a remarkably light sentence for those charges, just 2 years in prison. And since he'd already served a chunk of that waiting for trial, he got out relatively quickly. He was granted early release to home confinement in April 2020, partly due to COVID concerns, but the fallout, massive. He became infamous, labeled a snitch within hip-hop culture, ostracized, facing constant security threats. Though true to form, he tried to use that very infamy to stage a comeback.
The media frenzy around this case was just incredible. It felt like you couldn't escape it.
It was easily one of the most followed, most talked about legal cases in hip-hop history. It really did feel like a real-life crime drama. Every news outlet, music blog, social media platform was covering every twist and turn.
From the arrest to the testimony.
Exactly. His whole transformation from this loud, provocative internet troll to the government's star witness was just riveting for people. And his decision to testify, it sparked these intense debates about street codes, loyalty, the whole culture. It also really exposed how entangled some artists could become with serious organized crime. ABC News said his indictment sent shockwaves through the industry. It became this ultimate cautionary tale, didn't it? About the very real consequences waiting for artists who don't just rap about crime, but allegedly live it.
Okay, fast forward a few years to 2022. Another huge IGO case hits the headlines, this time involving a Grammy winner, Atlanta rapper Young Thug. And this one is still going on, right? Which tells you something about its complexity.
Yes, absolutely. It's a massive, sprawling case, still very much active and potentially setting major precedents. May 2022, Young Thug is arrested as part of this huge RICO indictment in Fulton County, Georgia. Prosecutors are alleging that his collective YSL, which stands for Young Slime Life, also the name of his record label, isn't just a label. It's actually a criminal street gang that he co-founded and leads.
A gang leader, that's the allegation.
That's the core allegation. Involved in everything from murder to drug trafficking, the indictment named 28 people, 56 counts. Conspiracy to violate the state RICO Act. Participation in criminal street gang activity. Specifically on the drug front, YSL members were accused of dealing with methamphetamine, hydrocodone, and marijuana, among other things. And when they raided Young Thug's home after the arrest, they apparently found more drugs and guns, adding to the charges.
And one of the really controversial parts of this case is the use of lyrics, right?
Exactly, that's drawn a ton of attention. The prosecution is using his rap lyrics, his social media posts, even music videos as evidence. They claim these things aren't just artistic expression, but overt acts proving the gang's existence and his role in it. It sparked a huge debate about artistic freedom versus criminal evidence.
And the fact that he's been denied bond all this time, that speaks volumes, especially for someone so famous. What does that ongoing detention mean for his career?
It's huge.
And the fact that he's been denied bond all this time, that speaks volumes, especially for someone so famous. What does that ongoing detention mean for his career?
Being denied bond and staying jailed this whole time has completely frozen his music career. Albums, tours, everything is on hold indefinitely while this plays out. And then you had several co-defendants, including another well-known rapper, Gunna, take plea deals. Specifically, Alfred pleas.
Remind us what that means.
But that sparked its own controversy. Whispers about cooperation, loyalty, standard stuff in these situations.
And if Thug is convicted?
He's facing potentially decades in prison. It could absolutely be career-ending, life-altering. This whole case is seen as pretty unprecedented, prosecuting such a high-profile artist as an alleged gang boss. It's sending chills through the industry, and it really forces this uncomfortable question. Where is the line between persona, lyrics, street image, and actual criminal enterprise? When does art become evidence? This trial feels like it's about more than just Young Thug. It feels like it could impact how rap.
Hey, it's been major news for so long, Rao. How's the public taking it? Is there a consensus?
Sick media, also, have people in the Atlanta community, particularly those affected by gang violence, who are applauding law enforcement. They see it as a necessary move to tackle real problems. And the sensational elements, the fame, the allegations of ordering hits, the lyrics in court that keeps it in the headlines. ABC News called it shockwaves through the hip-hop community. It's definitely fueled these big debates about whether rap culture itself is somehow on trial here. And with the trial dragging on, the anticipation, the speculation, the arguments, they're all still running really high. It's far from over.
A-OK from alleged gang ties to a straight-up drug trafficking bust. Fetty Wap. Most people know him from Trap Queen. And then he gets arrested for, well, actual trapping. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, was it?
No, the irony was front and center in the coverage. October 2021, he's arrested by the FBI. And not just anywhere, at the Rolling Loud Festival in New York. Right before he was supposed to go on stage.
Pretty dramatic, definitely. What were the specifics of the charges?
He was indicted as part of a major interstate drug trafficking conspiracy. Prosecutors accused him and 5 others of running this large-scale operation, transporting huge amounts over 100 kilograms of heroin, fentanyl, and crack cocaine.
100 kilos, wow.
Yeah, massive quantities. Allegedly bringing it from the West Coast, mainly California, over to New Jersey and Long Island for distribution. They claims the ring used all sorts of methods, postal service shipments, cars with hidden compartments. Pretty sophisticated stuff. Fetty Wap eventually pleaded guilty, not to the whole 100 kilos, but to conspiracy to distribute and possess controlled substances, specifically involving at least 500 grams of copan. Still, a very serious federal charge.
Right. Half a kilo of cocaine is still a huge amount. So a guilty plea. What did that mean for his sentencing? And what kind of message did the court try to send?
In May 2023, he was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. That included a mandatory minimum sentence of 5 years, just based on the quantity of drugs involved. Some of his co-defendants also pleaded guilty and got similar or longer sentences.
As years?
Yeah, and the judge made a point of saying how serious it was, using money earned from music to then finance and push narcotics. Prosecutors had actually pushed for a longer sentence. They argued he glamorized the drug trade in his music, particularly Trap Queen, and wanted to send a clear message. Dealing drugs leads to prison, not fame or fortune.
So a definite halt to his career.
Absolutely. His music career had already kind of cooled off after that initial massive success. But this conviction meant spending years behind bars. It really highlighted this potential path, maybe for artists whose initial fame fades. Does the lure of drug money become stronger? It definitely sparked conversations about, what kind of support systems are there for artists after the initial hype dies down? What about the pitfalls of sudden success if it doesn't last?
The arrest itself must have been a shock for people who just remembered him for that one huge hit song.
It really was. It made national headlines. And yeah, that irony, the trap queen guy busted for actual trapping, was the main angle everywhere. Coverage ramped up again after his guilty plea and sentencing. The Guardian and others reported on him admitting to trafficking these huge amounts of hard drugs. Public reaction seemed pretty mixed.
How so?
Well, a lot of disappointment, obviously. Someone who'd reached the top, resorting to major crime, but also maybe a little bit of sympathy. His career had stalled. He'd faced personal tragedies, like losing a young child. Some people wondered if that played a part. But overall, it just hammered home the power and danger of drug money, even for someone who'd already tasted fame. And it was another stark reminder. Fame doesn't put you above the law.
Okay, we've covered the fentanyl crisis, the complex RCCO cases. Now for our final section, let's broaden the scope a bit. We're looking at veteran artists, people who've been around for decades, still getting into serious trouble, sometimes with different drugs. And we'll also look globally, specifically at K-pop, to see how different cultural and legal contexts completely change the game when it comes to these kinds of scandals.
Yeah, these next few cases are really interesting because they show just how much the legal landscape varies and how public perception shifts depending on where you are and what substance is involved. Plus, we see the unique pressures on older artists still in the spotlight and the incredibly tight controls within an industry like K-pop where any scandal can be absolutely devastating.
Let's rewind to 2015. Nelly, huge name. Everyone knows Nelly. And this was kind of a classic scenario, wasn't it? The tour bus bust.
It really was. April 11th, 2015, was Tennessee state troopers over Nelly's tour bus. The initial reason was minor. Something about missing stickers. Then the troopers smelled marijuana coming from the bus. That gave them probable cause to search the whole vehicle.
And what did they find?
They found a small amount of marijuana, yeah, plus drug paraphernalia, but also several handguns. And the big one, what initial reports called 5 rocks of a substance that fuel tested positive as methamphetamine.
Meth on Nelly's bus? That sounds serious.
It absolutely could have been very serious, but ultimately, Nelly managed to avoid that felony conviction hanging over him. His lawyer argued pretty strongly in court that the substance wasn't actually meth, maybe disputed the field test results. Whatever the specifics of the deal, in 2016, Nelly ended up pleading guilty to a much lesser misdemeanor drug charge. He got about a year of probation, and here's the key part. After he successfully completed that probation without any issues, the conviction was expunged.
Expunge means?
It essentially means it's wiped clean from his public record. Like it never happened, legally speaking. So no felony record to affect future jobs, travel, things like that. A huge win for him, legally.
Oh, definitely an embarrassment. Briefly tarnished his image, for sure. Nelly himself always maintained he had no idea that stuff was on the bus. Blamed his entourage, but it did reinforce that old issue. Artists need to know what's happening on their own tour buses. Did he lose endorsements? Not really any major ones. He kept a bit of a lower profile for a while, but eventually got back to touring, even landed a Vegas residency later on. So his career largely bounced back.
It essentially means it's wiped clean from his public record, like it never happened, legally speaking. So no felony record to affect future jobs, travel, things like that. A huge win for him, legally.
Right, but still, the arrest itself must have been damaging.
Oh, definitely an embarrassment. Briefly tarnished his image, for sure. Nelly himself always maintained he had no idea that stuff was on the bus, blamed his entourage, but it did reinforce that old issue. Artists need to know what's happening on their own tour buses. Did he lose endorsements? Not really any major ones. He kept a bit of a lower profile for a while, but eventually got back to touring, even landed a Vegas residency later on. So his career largely bounced back.
Still, the news of Nelly, guns, alleged meth, that must have made headlines, given how big he was.
Oh yeah, widespread coverage.
Yeah.
It was surprising for many who remembered his, more party anthem image from the early 2000s. Fan reaction was pretty divided.
How so?
Some defended him, saying it must have belonged to someone else on the bus. Others, well, social media being social media, made jokes referencing hot and hair and meth. Not exactly tasteful, but it showed people were paying attention. Nelly himself and his lawyer were consistent, completely innocent victim of an overzealous search, but public interest faded pretty quickly once the initial shock wore off. By the time he got probation and the expungement, it felt like old news, mostly seen as him getting a lucky break.
Okay, from rap icon to rock legend. Phil Ride, the drummer for AC/DC for years, he had this incredibly bizarre, very public meltdown involving meth, threats, even initially a murder-for-hire plot. This sounds wild.
It was absolutely wild, a total saga. November 2014, police in New Zealand raid Phil RYD's home in Taranaki. The initial charge was stunning, attempting to procure a murder, trying to hire a hitman to take out a former employee he'd had a dispute with.
What drugs did they find?
When police searched his house, court documents mentioned finding significant quantities of methamphetamine and cannabis. In his bedroom, in the lounge, clearly more than just personal use implied. He eventually pleaded guilty in April 2015 to both the death threats and the drug charges. It was just this shocking spiral for a rock veteran.
Wow, so he pleads guilty to threatening to kill someone and possessing meth. What kind of sentence did he get? And what did that mean for AC/DC? They were huge, still touring.
It was a serious conviction, yeah, but the sentence itself may be lighter than some expected. In July 2015, the judge in New Zealand gave him 8 months of home detention, basically house arrest.
Not prison.
Not prison, which was notable considering the threatening charge alone could have carried up to 7 years. He also had to undergo drug rehab and was under really strict supervision, and he'd slip up and he'd likely go to jail. But the impact on AC/DC, immediate and final essentially. Rudd had been in and out of the band for decades, a core member, but with home detention, he couldn't travel, couldn't tour. Right. AC/DC had their massive rocker Bust World tour lined up for 2015, 2016. They had to scramble, bring back their former drummer, Chris Slade, to fill in. And Rudd, well, he never really rejoined after that. The scandal, the conviction, it effectively ended his time with the band. His reputation was severely damaged.
A founding member of AC/DC involved in death threats, meth, a dropped murder-for-hire plot. I mean, that must have been massive international news. It sounds like a movie script.
It absolutely blew up globally. Every major news outlet from ABC News here to the BBC, The Washington Post, they all covered this courtroom drama of the rock star gone wrong in vivid detail.
Rock world must have been stunned.
Totally stunned. It was hard for people to wrap their heads around. A guy from AC/DC, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, spiraling so publicly. Fan reaction was this weird mix of outrage. People felt he disgraced the band's legacy, but also a lot of concern. Many people pointed directly at the drugs, saying meth had clearly warped his judgment, fueled the paranoia and aggression. Rudd himself didn't help his image initially, muttering curses at reporters outside court. The media jumped all over that.
Yeah, not a good look.
Not at all. And bizarrely, the scandal even gave a little bump to sales of his solo album from 2014, Head Job, probably just morbid curiosity. But the whole thing served as this really stark reminder, didn't it, that the old rock and roll excesses can catch up with you even decades later. And it showed why AC/DC, known for being pretty disciplined, had to make that clean break.
Okay, another huge name, another private jet incident. Lil Wayne, federal trouble again. But this one had a really unexpected political twist at the end. It felt like celebrity power played a role we don't often see.
Yeah, that ending was definitely a curveball. December 23rd, 2019, Lil Wayne's chartered private jet lands in Miami. Coming from LA, federal agents FBI ATF are waiting. They searched the plane based on a tip about weapons and drugs.
What did they find this time?
They found a loaded, gold-plated .45 caliber handgun in his luggage, plus what they described as personal use amounts of several drugs, cocaine, MDMA, ecstasy, and oxycodone, plus some marijuana, which wasn't really the focus.
Okay, but the gun was the main issue.
Exactly, because Lil Wayne already had a felony conviction on his record from years ago, another weapons charge, actually. That meant as a convicted felon, he was legally barred from possessing any firearms.
So the gun charge was federal?
Yes, he was formally charged in federal court in late 2020, specifically with felon possession of a firearm. Beijing pursued charges for the small amounts of drugs. Facing a potentially serious sentence, Wayne pleaded guilty to the gun charge in December 2020.
And that charge carried what? Up to 10 years? That's serious time. Could have ended his career. But then explain how that happened right before sentencing.
It was genuinely stunning. January 20th, 2021, literally Donald Trump's last day as president. Lil Wayne's name appears on Trump's list of final pardons and commutations. A full presidential pardon.
Which means
the conviction was completely wipe it away nullified, no sentencing, no prison time. It was like the guilty plea never happened.
And the connection to Trump?
Well, it was widely reported and heavily speculated that Wayne's public endorsement of Trump just a few months earlier, during the 2020 election campaign, played a big role. He'd even met with Trump, tweeted a photo praising his criminal justice work.
Ah, the timing.
The timing was certainly suggestive to many observers. So while Wayne dodged prison, the whole episode did kind of reinforce this public narrative about his long history with drugs and legal issues, including past seizures linked to codeine. And from an industry perspective, it was this wild example of celebrity leverage, right? A case goes from potentially 10 years in federal prison to completely erased, seemingly due to political connections. It really highlighted this unusual intersection of fame, politics, and the justice system.
That pardon definitely caused a media storm and split opinions, especially given the politics involved.
Oh, absolutely. When news first broke that he pleaded guilty, that was a major story. CNN, NPR, everyone covered it. A rap icon potentially going away for years.
And the pardon hits.
Right? And suddenly the story explodes again. Outlets like Vanity Fair, BBC, they explicitly linked the pardon to his Trump endorsement. Headlines were like, Trump pardons Lil Wayne after endorsement. Public reaction was all over the place, often falling along partisan lines. Some fans were just relieved, didn't want to see him locked up. Others were highly critical, saw it as a blatant transactional pardon, questioning the fairness of it all.
Lots of jokes online, I bet.
Tons. Memes about him thinking his way out of prison were everywhere. So yeah, that scandal stands out, not just for the guns and drugs, but for that unique political ending. A rap superstar using presidential power to sidestep the legal system in a way most people never could.
Okay, finally, let's shift focus dramatically. We're gonna look at a globally famous K-pop star, T.O.P. from the group Big Bang. His cannabis scandal really throws into sharp relief the unique pressures and incredibly strict laws in South Korea. It's a whole different world.
It absolutely is. A stark contrast to everything else we've discussed. June 2017, TP is actually in the middle of his mandatory military service, serving as a police conscript at the time. Then this news breaks. Seoul police reveal he smoked marijuana. On 4 occasions, back in October 2016, at his home with a female trainee singer. This apparently came out when she was investigated and named him.
In South Korea, marijuana is...
It's extremely illegal. If a zero-tolerance policy, any use, even if it happened years ago, even if it happened overseas where it's legal, is a serious criminal offense if you're a Korean citizen.
Wow, okay.
TP initially denied it, apparently said it was just an e-cigarette, but then they did a hair follicle test, and it came back positive for cannabis. He was formally indicted for illegal drug use.
And then things took an even darker turn.
Yeah, tragically. Right as the scandal erupted publicly, TP was found unconscious, an overdose of anti-anxiety medication. He was widely reported and seen as a likely suicide attempt driven by the immense public shame and pressure of the scandal.
Oh, that's awful.
He was hospitalized in intensive care for several days, which put the legal process on hold. After he recovered, he faced trial in July 2017, pleaded guilty to all the marijuana charges, and gave a very public emotional apology.
So, given how strict the laws are and the added layer of being a K-pop idol, how did the system and the industry actually handle this? What does a suspended sentence mean there?
Right. In July 2017, the court gave him a 10-month jail sentence, but crucially, it was suspended for 2 years.
Suspended meaning?
Meaning he wouldn't actually go to jail unless he committed another offense during those 2 years. It's a form of probation, essentially a common sentence for first-time offenders, even in strict Korea, but still a criminal conviction hanging over him. He also got a fine around $12,000.
Okay, so no jail time, but still consequences.
So no jail time, but still major consequences. Legally, he was immediately kicked out of his military police unit, had to finish his mandatory service in a different non-police public service role. Huge dishonor. But the industry consequences were arguably even more profound and long-lasting. He was effectively benched from Big Bang. The group went on hiatus anyway, as other members enlisted, but when they eventually made a comeback years later, TP wasn't part of it.
Really?
Yeah, and eventually, in 2021, he officially left YG Entertainment, their agency. The scandal's shadow was just too long. It was a massive stain on KPP's carefully managed, clean image, a top-tier idol group involved in a drug scandal, almost unheard of in that tightly controlled industry. You have to understand, in Korea, idols are expected to be perfect role models. Any hint of scandal, especially drugs, isn't just illegal. It's seen as a moral betrayal that can completely end a career. It's vastly different from Western celebrity culture.
Yeah, that difference in public reaction must have been huge compared to, say, a similar incident in the US or UK.
It's night and day. The case was enormous news in South Korea, obviously, and among K-pop fans worldwide, domestically. The reaction was overwhelmingly negative. The stigma against drugs is incredibly strong. TP was just hammered in the Korean press for bringing shame, betraying fans, setting a bad example.
It's that deep cultural aspect.
Exactly. Drug use isn't just a crime. It's seen as bringing shame on your family, your group, even your country. That's why these public apologies are such a huge deal there. Internationally, though, some fans were more sympathetic. Many see marijuana as minor, especially compared to harder drugs, and there was a lot of concern for his mental health, particularly after the overdose attempt. Media everywhere covered it. Reuters, BBC, they all reported on K-pop sensation TP getting his suspended sentence because Big Bang was globally massive. The scandal definitely forced some reflection within the Korean entertainment world, but the insane pressure these idols are under and T.O.P's tearful public apology, broadcast on TV where he talked about bringing shame, that really summed it up. It remains one of KPP's most defining drug scandals, a real cautionary tale about how unforgiving those strict laws and that demanding idol culture can be.
Wow, okay, we have covered so much ground today. From those devastating fentanyl overdoses through the complex RKO cases, the veteran artist stumbles, the political pardons, right up to the unique world of K-pop. These 10 cases, they really paint this vivid, sometimes really heartbreaking picture of just how complicated and frankly dangerous the relationship between music fame and drugs has been over this past decade.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how each case is unique, yet you see these really strong threads running through them all. The constant presence of drugs, unfortunately, across different genres, different levels of fame, the terrifying rise of things like fentanyl making everything deadlier, and then the huge variations in legal consequences depending on where you are. what you did, who you are, and how all of that intersects with public perception, with mental health struggles, with these big debates about artistic freedom versus accountability. But at the end of the day, what really stands out is the profound impact, often career-ending, sometimes life-ending. These scandals have undeniably shaped the artists involved and forced the industry itself to ask some tough questions.
Yeah, hopefully listening to this deep dive has given you a much richer, more detailed understanding than you'd get just scrolling through headlines. That was our goal, right? To help you be truly well-informed. You should now have a pretty solid overview of how these Mayu's scandals played out and why they mattered. The repercussions were often huge and surprising.
And it leaves you with a big question to think about, doesn't it? How much does the intense pressure of fame itself, maybe combined with lifestyle, sometimes chlorophyll in the music, contribute to these cycles? The drug use, the legal trouble, and then what's the responsibility of the industry? The labels, the managers, the promoters. Do they have a bigger role to play in addressing these systemic issues? In protecting artists from the very dangers that seem to come hand in hand with huge success? It's a really complex dynamic, definitely worth thinking more about.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into music's major drug scandals from the last 10 years. We really hope you found these stories and insights as compelling and maybe as sobering as we did.
Yeah, we definitely encourage you to keep exploring these topics, keep thinking about those bigger questions they raise about fame, addiction, responsibility, and just the human side of it all.
Until next time, keep digging deeper into the stories that shape our world.